Okay, we're going to jump right to how you fix your GM V8 LS, generally LS87 engine. What's happening is at the factory, some employee is hand chamfering the hell out of the oil feed holes in the crankshaft. That creates essentially a rotating slot for the oil to just bleed off at the crankshaft. That and the fact that GM used to recommend 0W20 oil for the purpose of basically to save a few miles per gallon on the CAFE standards. And what you have is a bottom end that's bleeding the oil, starving the rest of the engine. The bearings aren't getting enough lubrication because they've over-chamfered the holes, and it's going right out instead of being captured under the bearing for the bearing to ride on. Now, here's a few examples, and this guy is running his mouth, but he never shows up the solution.
Sorry for all my 6.2 owners. Let me show you why. Let me show you the damage done to the crank. Look at all that. Let me show you right here.
Doesn't mean anything.
Here we got the connecting rod bearings.
Okay, so doesn't mean anything. Now we passed right by the culprit, which was the oil feed hole on the main. And you'd have to go back and look at it, but it's over chamfered. Let me show you what a good crank looks like. Okay, here's the guy on YouTube that tears down engines for entertainment purposes only. Here's the date this one was posted. And we're going to jump to right is the core of the problem, which he never identifies.
Main bearing that was coming apart. I mean,
Look at that. There's the problem. He never identifies it, but look at those oil holes. Do you see how much they are over chamfered? Now, just look closely at where the bearing marks are. You can see there is less than maybe 16th of an inch maybe to what will be the edge of the bearing. First of all, the oil feed holes are too large on the crank in the first place. A little too large. What GM should have done was increase the oil pressure and not try to increase the oil volume. Those holes are drilled too big in the cross drill, too big in the first place. But when you chamfer them like that, that's it. You've just created a slot right across the rod or the bearing. Doesn't matter if it's on the main or if it's on the rods, and it is on both. Somebody at GM, some worker, doesn't know what they're doing, and they're over chamfering those holes. There's no need to chamfer them at all. The purpose is to simply break any burr from the cross drilling, and these are opening the holes up larger. They're turning, I don't know, whatever it is, 1/4 inch hole into double that size, and there goes all your oil. He never figures it out. Now let's just go to the end and see if there's another one.
Single one of these, and I'm kind of bummed out here because I was really hoping that I'd have a good pair of journals to cross-section of.
Now here's the issue. That chamfer is so deep on most of these cranks that 10 thousandths isn't going to take it out. If you could save that crank at all, you would have to grind it at least 30 thousandths over. Now 60 thousandths is a 16th of an inch. 30 thousandths is a 32nd. You can see that chamfer is deeper than that. So even after you grind that crank to say 30 over, you may not get rid of that entire chamfer. It still may be too large. The recommended thing, just buy a new crank. What kills me is these guys on YouTube, they haven't got a clue what they're doing. And he's up there, you know, showing you the carnage without being able to explain it. And in fact, at the end, he stands up there and gives a monologue that he doesn't know what the hell's wrong with it. Okay, here's same guy, different video. Still hasn't figured it out. Still clueless. This one's called, will all GM 6.2s fail? Of course they will, with that chamfered crank like that. Okay, yeah. Yes, they will. May 3rd, 2025. Still clueless.
To this engine, and it could be.
Notice the title, Money Shot. This is wrecked. Look at the chamfers. Okay, you have to understand. Look at the chamfer on the main. That's the one on the right. It is effectively doubling the size of that hole by the time it gets under the bearing. Look at the chamfers on the rods, the two on the left. Not as bad, but when you add it up collectively across the whole crankshaft, it's junk. If you had to grind this crank, if you could grind this crank, you would have to go at least 30 over before that hole might go back to normal size. He's still clueless. You're welcome to go watch his video. He rips them down for entertainment purposes. There's a URL up at the top. And you can stop at the ampersand T equals 2720, because that's where this jumps to. This is absolutely the problem. Stop pointing to all the carnage. And this is the problem. This is the issue right here. Why GM doesn't know it? Well, I don't know. They got that female in charge as the CEO. Mary Barra, I think her name is. Is she a mechanic? She'd be clueless. I would say all the old-timers are retired who know better than to do this. Any party who grinds cranks know better than to do this. Now let me show you, as I said, a good crank. Let's go to good old eBay and see pictures there. Okay, good old eBay. Let's first search for L87 crankshaft. '86 results, and there's a bunch of them. There are a bunch of what they call results. Some of these pre-owned ones are the junk. Some of the brand new one there, 590, may or may not be good. Let's see if there's any pictures. There's a chamfered journal. Don't like that. Let's see if there's another picture. Chamfered journals. Hey, look closely. Not good. Now this is brand new. Who's it brand new from? It's brand new from GM. Chamfered journals. Don't buy that junk. $590.99. Junk. Junk. Brand new. Okay? Now, let's put in the URL of a reground one that I know is a good crank. Now, there's the eBay item up at the top. General picture. This is a ground crank with bearings. And I have no idea about who this company is. I'm not this company. But for $349, you get a quote a remanufactured crank. And by the way, you know, GM engines, the crank has basically been the same since 1950s when the small block came out. And 5.3, 60, 62, 58X means it has the reluctor wheel on the back there. So let's see if there's other pictures. Oh, yes, there is. Oh, there's a hole. Let's get a close look. No chamfer. None whatsoever. Let's see if there's another picture. No chamfer. None whatsoever. Let's get another picture. Standing on end. No chamfer. No chamfer. Laying down. No chamfer. Now, I can't tell you if this is the actual item that they'll ship. But I can tell you it looks like this is a good crank. No chamfers. Now, this is reground. This is 10 under. I don't know. I don't think 10 would clean up those previous cranks that you saw. A ground crank is just a crank that's been ground. 10,000s off of it, 20,000s, 30,000s. I think most of those cranks in the other pictures would need at least 30,000s ground off. I don't think any bearings go beyond that. So if you buy a new crank from GM, that isn't going to solve it because it's chamfered. It's messed up. Now, even after you do that, you put in new bearings and a new crank, you should also increase the oil pressure by changing the spring in the oil pump and using Lucas and MOS2 liquid moly. Those two specifically, not other additives. Lucas oil stabilizer and MOS2 liquid moly, in addition to changing to the 040 weight oil that GM now recommends. A good mechanic can get this crank out without taking out the engine. You could do it in your driveway if you want to cuss a lot. It's pretty hard to get your hand up in there to get behind the crank to take the flywheel off. And many people will just tell you it's easier to take the engine out. Well, it depends on the transmission. The transmissions with the pan that comes off the bell housing, it's easy. And the transmissions with the bell housing that is complete on the engine, not so easy. You can also loosen the transmission, take the torque converter bolts out and slide the transmission back about 1 inch or 2 inches so you can get your hand up in there to unbolt the crankshaft from the flex plate, which goes on behind the reluctor wheel there. But assuming you can get the pan off. So for $350, and maybe you'll find one cheaper, you can fix the problem. There's a possibility you can take out your crank if it's not too bad and try to grind it. My bet is you're gonna have to tell them go 30 over. If you can find bearings that go larger than that, because they're made in various places, then you might have to go larger than that. We're not talking about a performance crank, we're talking about fixing the oil bleed problem. Okay, this guy shows you how and where the oil pressure spring is to replace it. You can buy just a spring. This one has the engine out of the vehicle. You don't need to take the engine out. If you get the pan off, this is up at the very front of the engine. This picture is upside down and the front of the engine. There's the URL of the video. There's the title. And I don't know anything about this guy. And this is the date it was posted. So it's quite old. And just a minute of what he has to say.
Over here we got our Melling high pressure LLS oil pump. It's the 10295. This thing comes with a couple extra springs. The red spring is going to be the high pressure one. The blue one is going to be a lower pressure. I think it said it would drop at about 8 psi. It does not affect the idle pressure, so it's just the higher end pressure. And it also comes with a Copo spring, which is a Camaro, limited edition Camaro Copo spring. It's basically made to simulate that, and that will actually increase the PSI of oil pressure about 15 PSI over the red springs. Now, with this coming with the 3 different springs, the red is in there for the higher pressure, and I'm going to go ahead and install the Copo spring just because the boost application, I feel like a little more oil getting to my bearings, a little more pressure to my bearings is not going to hurt anything. So we're going to go ahead and roll the motor over, and
so you can go watch his video. It's really easy. 5/16 I think it is. You unbolt it. He's got a terrible view of it here. And then if you're upside down or if the engine's in the vehicle, you're going to have to hold the spring up in there. And you see he's putting in the Camaro spring, which makes sense. And you can go to GM or you can find that online for just a few bucks. The labor here is what's going to kill you. But you should do this no matter what. You should do this first thing if you can't afford to get the crank out of that engine immediately. After you drop the pan and inspect it, use some plastic gauge to see what the clearance is. GM's recall, they will put in new bearings, and that's all. That's not going to fix the problem with the over-chamfered crankshafts, because the over-chamfered crankshafts is the problem. Okay, here's a very good video on engine oil additives. There's the title, and there's the date it was posted. I have no affiliation with this channel, and this is going to jump to the end, near the end.
We've covered the 11 that you should never touch. Now, let's break down the 5 engine oil additives that really work. The ones that can extend engine life, improve performance, and actually earn a spot in your garage. Next up at number 5, Lucas Heavy Duty Oil Stabilizer. Some additives survive for decades for a reason, and Lucas Heavy Duty Oil Stabilizer is one of them. If you've been around repair shops or truck bays, you've probably seen this familiar white bottle sitting on the shelf. Mechanics have been reaching for it since the 1980s, and it's still...
Now, Lucas Heavy Duty Oil Stabilizer is basically thick stuff. It's like the STP, the Racer's Edge. What it does is it improves the viscosity of oil. It actually changes the weight instead of, a 0W20 or 0W40. It's going to tend to make it more of a straight weight, heavier oil. That even at high temperatures, it remains a heavy protective oil. It doesn't increase lubricity that much. It just increases the viscosity of the oil. And if you've got a sloppy L87 crankshaft, this is the stuff you need to keep it alive until you can get that crankshaft out of the vehicle. Now, let's move to, there's 5 of them they've got, but we're going to move to the end of where
the few additives that actually saves you from expensive repairs. Coming in at number 2, Liqui Moly MOS 2 Anti-Friction. We already talked about how cheap moly additives can wreck an engine, but here's the flip side. When it's done right, molybdenum disulfide is one of the most effective friction reducers you can put in an oil system. And nobody does it better than Liqui Moly's MOS 2 Anti-Friction. Liqui Moly is a German brand that's been building a reputation for decades, not with gimmicks, but with chemistry that's actually approved by European automakers. Their MOS2 formula uses ultrafine particles, small enough to stay suspended in oil without clumping or settling. That's the key difference. Instead of creating sludge, the moly plates onto metal surfaces, forming a protective...
Now, as you just saw there, they do actually make an oil. It's hard to find. You can find it on Amazon if you like. As you can see, they do make an oil, and I believe you can find it on Amazon. 5W50 is a really heavier oil. In this case, I don't think it would hurt an L87 to put that in there, because you need a heavier oil until you can get that piece of shit crankshaft out of it. If you do not get that crankshaft out of that engine, you will have a major engine failure. I don't know why GM is so clueless, except I can say the old timers have retired. Maybe the people who grind cranks don't work there anymore, and these kids that are coming in probably have been trained wrong. You don't over-chamfer a crankshaft like that, and I can't understand why all these people on YouTube put their face all up in their video. Your face doesn't solve the problem, people. You need to show the solution. It's not your face in the video like you're some kind of YouTube star. And a lot of them are, because YouTube pays them for anything they put up. YouTube, these monetized channels, make money on the YouTube ad money. The more people that view the channel, the more money they make every time an ad plays. So they tend to be long-winded. They want to stretch out the content, whatever it is, with any old bullshit so those ads can play. You want 2 or 3 of them to play during your video so you get cha-chinged. At any rate, that's all I got to say. Get that crank out of there, your engine will continue to last. You'll be back to a good old one. I will give you a link to a GM at this last thing, to the GM engineer who said he won't buy any GM car, I believe, beyond 2006, because that's the year that ended all the best engines, all the freedoms that you can. Today, transmissions, you replace a part in them or replace the transmission. You may have to take the thing to the dealer to have it flashed to the car. The days of going to the boneyard are going to end, where you can pick up a junkyard transmission or rebuild it yourself. Some of these newer ones, after the 4L80E, are locked to the VIN number of the ECM of the car. And when you put it in there, it's not going to work until you take it to a dealer and have it flashed. or take it to somebody and have it flashed. So anyway, that link is coming up next, and then that's the end. So hit like and subscribe if this solves your problem, because this is how you save your GM V8 engine. Get the crank out. If you can't get the crank out, use something like this, 5W50 liquid moly, until you can get the crank out. And or if you hear it really knocking in there, use Lucas heavy duty oil stabilizer also to hold it together until you can get that crank out of there. At the very least, you can try putting on new bearings or 1/1000 oversized bearings. They do sell those. It's not going to solve that problem for very long. That over chamfered crankshaft, depending on how bad yours is over chamfered, is always going to bleed oil. Put in a higher pressure oil spring and you'll save your engine for a while. You may save it for quite a while with a higher pressure oil spring, pressure pump spring, this kind of oil, and some Lucas heavy duty oil stabilizer. I don't care if the damn thing is brand new. That's how bad those over chamfered cranks are, and that is the absolute problem. Don't look at all the results of low oil. It doesn't matter. Everybody can show all the pictures they want of torn up pistons, rod bearings, main bearings chewed up. They can show all you want, a rod through the block. It starts with that crankshaft. That is the core issue that is causing all these engines to fail. Plain and simple. Any old timer, any crank grinder will tell you, yep, that's the problem. You take a crank with that big chamfer on it to a crank grinder, and an old time crank grinder will look at this and says, this is junk. We can't grind this. This is already chamfered too deep, and once I grind it, you're still going to have that big oil hole because it's over chamfered. Now, finally, here's an interview of a former GM engineer who tells you the skinny on what's really going on. There's the URL up at the top. This is the Car Guy Online's webpage, or YouTube channel, I should say. This is the date it was published, June 20th, 2025. Here's the deal. Very simple. He says, I believe, he won't buy a GM vehicle that's newer than 2006, because that's the point where everything got really bad, and there are things that lock you in to being unable to even fix your car. Transmissions that have to be flashed, and the list goes on and on. You need to listen to this all the way through. I'm going to start it, and then I'm going to zip to the middle. And
all right, we've got Cello here. Cello has decided to go by a different name, and I think I'm going to actually let you introduce yourself the way you want to be introduced, because you're a former GM engineer, but I don't want to say too much because we haven't actually talked.
This is a long-winded thing. Let's zip to the middle.
And then going to CAN bus. General Motors, for example, has high-speed, low-speed LAN for their CAN bus system. Everything now is going to a traditional local network, just like for your home computers or servers, where everything is going to work on an actual Ethernet-based LAN network for higher speed interconnectivity.
Another thing he also says is electric windows are no longer electric. They're electronic. In other words, they won't work. There's no simple switch that runs a motor. It's all tied into the ECM. So they won't work unless sometimes it's, coated to the car. We're not going to listen to too much of this here, but you need to,
and
let's zip to somewhere else.
temperature. And then once we've reached it, those thermostats will open and maintain our temperatures. In terms of those fluids, though, there has been actually a fair amount of improvement in quality of, for example, ATF. But
This is where there's a misnomer out there that people think that the new transmissions can handle higher temperatures. They cannot. They cannot. Maybe the fluids handle higher temperatures without burning and breaking down, but the one thing you want to do in an automatic transmission is keep it as cool as possible, right around, as he says, right around 160 to 180. Because at that point, a transmission works by friction. The clutches in there are simply steel plates pushing against friction material to stop it from sliding. Well, they still slide a little bit. And as a matter of fact, in the Allison transmission, Allison makes a clutch friction that's crosshatched. They call them waffle frictions. And they're very aggressive, and they hold well without slipping. Because in the 4L80E, one of the dumbest things I think they've ever done is the 4L80E has a forward clutch, which is engaged at all times unless you're in neutral or park. That means you're sitting at a light with your foot on the brake. That clutch is engaged and slipping, because somewhere that energy has to go. The engine is still turning the pump, and since the vehicle's not moving, that clutch has to be slipping, and all you're doing is building up heat. So, you know, GM's tried every kind of stupid thing, and this guy was in the transmission repair group. GM's tried everything on the 4L80E to solve that forward clutch issue. The bottom line is, the problem is, you put too much fluid in there, okay, it slips real good. It doesn't get too hot. You flood it, you bring up the line pressure, and that's great. Except it slips real good and gets so when you go on the forward, it slips. So GM has now gone to drilling holes in the steels so that you can get some of the fluid away from the clutch so that they'll hold better. I don't know what to say. That's stupid. The Allison frictions with the crosshatch pattern, they're very aggressive. They have slots in them that allow the oil to get away so that the clutch can hold. But the ultimate real problem is the 4L80E forward clutch is always engaged unless you're in neutral or park. So the best thing to do is, you really want to save your transmission. It sounds silly, but as you're braking, throw it in neutral so that that clutch disengages. Your engine, your transmission will last, and really last. At any rate, he goes over that here. This guy touches on pretty much everything wrong with General Motors. Now, many people don't know this, but General Motors doesn't make anything anymore at all. Everything's imported. Everything's contracted. Much of it comes from China via contract. Many of those transmission parts, engine parts, replacement parts, they're, as he says, they're second tier parts. And they may not come from the same manufacturer that makes the parts for a OEM manufacturing, meaning the car on the assembly line gets a different part than the parts you buy over the counter. That's not good. But what can I say? Much of this stuff comes out of China, and it went so bad as General Motors actually contracted with the Chinese to make the whole damn car. The car may say General Motors on it, but it's actually a Chinese SUV. It's rebadged completely. Some of the Buicks are that way. And the only thing General Motors is making are the trucks. And the trucks are only made here as the body. The engine itself is assembled in Mexico. I don't know where the cranks are ground, and I don't know if the problem is coming out of Mexico with the over-chamfering of the cranks. I can tell you, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. That's the problem with those engines. So General Motors is trying to be just basically a corporation and not a car maker. They don't want to be in the manufacturing business. They don't want the liability of employees that get hurt on the job and that kind of thing. All these plants have been cut back and closed. And this guy is just telling the story. So let's zip to a little bit farther.
The manufacturers are not really using them. For example, General Motors changed from Dextron 3, I believe they went up to H, to now Dextron 6. And just going to a semi-synthetic or a full synthetic was a good improvement. But there are transmission fluids that most of these manufacturers offer.
Let's go a little further.
So they create parts that go to new vehicles only, and they create parts that are for repair only. And they differentiate them in fit and finish quality. So let's say they just produced a water pump, and the water pumps that...
You get the idea. So, that's the end of this video. Hit like and subscribe if you think this is going to solve your problem. But I can tell you, if you got a V8 of any kind from General Motors, drop the pan, inspect the crankshaft for over-chamfering, use a product called Plastic Gauge to see what the clearance is on those bearings. And you're smart if you're in there, just replace the damn bearings with 1/1000 oversize if you can, to increase the oil pressure and keep the engine running longer. If you don't, you could be driving down the road and she just, boom, will lock up. It'll run until it won't. Liquid Moly MOS2, Liquid Moly Oil 5W50, Lucas Oil Stabilizer, and Walmart actually makes a version of an oil stabilizer that's basically the same as the Lucas. I think it's like maybe $3 cheaper for a quart. Or you can buy a gallon of Lucas cheaper than 4 quarts of the Walmart. So, 35 bucks I think it is, or something. So it's worth it if you're driving a General Motors engine. Thicken that oil, increase the oil pressure. If you live in a cold climate where you're concerned that you might start in the morning, the Liquid Moly MOS2 will help you start in the morning, because that actually is slippery. Don't overdo it. You can get Liquid Moly MOS2 if you cannot find it at your local store or AutoZone. You can get it on Amazon, and you can get it on Amazon in a size that is for a diesel oil change. Now, diesel, some people have said that if you go back and watch that video on additives you should not use, some people have said don't put Liquid Moly in a HUE electronic diesel injection system or direct injection system. There are some things the liquid moly, for some reason, these direct injection and electronic injection systems don't like. I use it in a mechanical injection system or 6.5 diesel. I'm gonna tell you, it quieted it right down. The engine used to use oil, a quart every 1,000 miles, and after running that, it stopped using it. The theory is the slipperiness of the MOS2 slipped the carbon that was sticking in the rings so that the rings were free to move again. And so now it does not use oil. It runs very quiet. It starts very easily. I do not overdo it. I use the truck size for 8 quarts on an oil change. And I do use Lucas oil stabilizer. So people ask me, is that a diesel? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how is it so quiet? Ancient Chinese secret. So hit like and subscribe, as they say. This will solve your problem if you're driving an L87, anything. Doesn't matter, because the cranks and the engines are all the same in those General Motors V8s. They haven't changed them since 1957, except for the reluctor wheel on the back. As a matter of fact, when I rebuilt my 1999 Vortec, I can tell you my crank was not over chamfered, or I would not have put it back in there. And I put 1/1000 oversized bearings in it, Melling high volume oil pump, and that thing starts like honey, runs very quiet, and GM makes good engine. What they can't make is good employees. So whoever's over chamfering those crankshafts is killing GM. Maybe it's a coup from inside, from the employees. We'll show them. We'll fuck up these cranks, and we'll fuck up the whole company, and the idiots upstairs will never figure it out. Certainly Mayor Barra has not figured it out, CEO. General Motors is no longer the American car company. They do not manufacture anything anymore. They do not manufacture in America much of anything anymore. It is the American wet dream that ends badly.